Hello everyone, I am Imal Smile and today I'm going to explain the project which is about testing of our blood donation software which is based on Python, and this project is for ITC 435 software testing supervised by Dr. Sami Naji. So at first I'll go through documentation and give you a brief about our application. And what's the purpose of this application? So this application is for blood donation eligibility check. It has functionalities of checking whether someone is eligible to donate blood or not, along with a sign up page, a login page, and a series of conditions that contain a predefined condition inside database from where we can check whether the person who we are trying to input his or her details in our application is eligible to donate blood or not. So in here we can see the functionalities of our application, and if we go further, here it is our documentation for the software testing of this application, where we have listed the functionalities that we are trying to test, which is the hemoglobin, weight, donation interval, age, questions regarding the health of the person, and along with our approach and testing phase. And in testing phase, we have equivalence classes for each conditions or for each input that we have. So I'll go briefly and explain each one of them point by point, one by one, and their maximum, minimum, and their validity and invalidity through the user interface along with the code that we have done. And we have put markers for instance, valid, invalid. When we put an invalid input in our terminal, it shows that our input is invalid. If it's valid, then in our terminal it will give us a valid. And also similarly, in our graphical user interface, it will give us a pop-up message that our input is valid or it's not valid. That's the user interface of the application, where we enter the details of our patient or of our donor to check his or her eligibility for donating blood. And all these edit texts are connected with a database, with a backend database and coding of Python. For its eligibility, for instance, for the weight, we have inside a table in the database. I'll go and show you the table. In here we have the tables of the application database, and we have the verification table. Inside the verification table, we have columns for instance, we were talking about the age. In age, we have a column for minimum age and a column for maximum age. In here, our maximum input should not exceed 60, and our minimum input should not be below 70. And if it's inside the domain or in the boundary of between 17 and 60, then our donor is eligible to donate blood, and our input would be valid, or our class partition or our equivalence class will be valid. Similarly, we have other inputs for maximum weight, minimum weight, for maximum hemoglobin, minimum hemoglobin, and a series of questions that are, all of them are predefined. For instance, for question 1, we have to input good. If it's not good, then it will be an invalid input. And question 2, no. And question 3, no. And if it's yes, then it will give us a invalid pop-up message, and also it will show invalid inside our code and terminal, where we have put our marker to check whether our code is working properly or not. Now we will go through our code to check the equivalent class conditions inside our code. In here we have the function of eligibility, and in here we have the submit button function inside the eligibility function. And inside that button, we have a series of if conditions, if else conditions that show the eligibility of donors through the edit text, and all of these conditions are connected with the database that I've previously illustrated, where we had maximum and minimum boundaries for each input. So in here we can say we are getting the minimum value of weight from our database and the maximum value of weight for our database, and then we check it. If it's inside the boundary, if it is inside the boundary, it will print a valid, and also it will give us a pop-up message through tkinter message box. And if it's invalid, then it will give us a print inside the terminal invalid, and also it will give us a pop-up message inside our user interface that through tkinter message box that our input is invalid. So we will start with equivalence classes, and our first condition is the equivalent class for age, and we have the invalid input of 60, which is greater than 60, and invalid of 70, and if it's between 17 and 60, then it will be valid, and it's one point above 60, it will be invalid, and 1 point below 17, it will be invalid as well. So we'll go and check it inside our code. First, we'll do it in user interface, and here we can say that we had 60 and 70 for the age. So we'll put in age 16, which is below our boundary. We will submit it. It will give us invalid. You are not eligible to donate blood. And we'll go check inside our terminal. And we see we have received the invalid. Our last output was invalid. So now we will enter 1 point above the boundary, which is 61. Then we will submit, and still it would be invalid because we are not eligible to donate blood. And if we check our terminal, it is still invalid. And now we will try to input a valid input, which is according to our class boundary, it's between 17 and 60. So we'll enter 45, and it will give us a valid input. If we submit, then congratulations, you are eligible to donate blood. And if we check inside our terminal, then the last output is valid. So through that check-in, we can understand that we have a valid input when we satisfy the boundary input, which is between 17 and 60. And if it's 1 point above or 1 point below the boundary, then it will give us invalid outputs. If it's inside the boundary, then it would be valid. Since we have more equivalence classes, I'll go through each one of them quickly, just with inputting inside our GUI and then showing the output inside our terminal, and also in tkinter message box. So we'll go with hemoglobin. So hemoglobin, the minimum was below 12.5, and the maximum was above 15.5. If it's 16 or it's below it's 11, then it's not going to accept. So I'll put 17, which is above the boundary, and then I'll press enter, so it will be an invalid. We check inside our terminal, so it will be invalid. And if I put 11, which is below our boundary, then still it would be invalid. Check, still it is invalid in our terminal. And so I'll put 17, 15.5, I'll put 15.5 here. And donation interval, if donation interval is below 12, I will enter 10. It would be still invalid. It's invalid in our terminal as well. If we if you put like above, like, then still it would be invalid because we have entered something that is more than the age of a normal person. Then it will still be invalid. If we enter 75 and we press submit, it will be valid because it's inside our boundary, and if we check inside our code's terminal, then it would be valid. And similarly, we will check the weight. So weight should not be below 50. If we enter 49, it's invalid. If we enter like 200, it would be invalid because the maximum was 150. So still it's invalid. And we'll go check our questions. In questions, we have 3 questions. How's your general health? So the answer is good or bad. If it's bad, it will give us invalid. In our terminal, it will be invalid as well. And if we enter good, since it satisfies our condition inside our code, it will, and also in the database, in the table of the verification table of the database, if we submit, then it would be valid. And inside our code, you can see it's valid because it satisfies the conditions that we have inside our code here. The question one, if it's equal to the question or the value that we have inside our database, so it would be valid. So we have 2 conditions in our second questions, which is no and yes. If it's equal to yes, like have you had any fever in the last 3 weeks? So if it's yes, then you're not eligible to donate blood, and according to our condition, it would be invalid. And we can check it inside our code conditions as well. So it would be here invalid. And if we enter no, which satisfies our condition, it would be valid. And inside our code, it would be valid. And similarly with the last question, if we add yes, if you had any symptoms of infection, so it would be invalid because you're not eligible to donate blood if it doesn't satisfy the condition that we have inside our code. So it will give us an invalid output in our terminal. And if it's no, then it will give us congratulations, you are eligible to donate blood because it satisfies the condition inside our code and also the attribute inside our database as well. So we'll have a valid output in our terminal and then also in our tkinter message box. And here, congratulations, you're eligible to donate blood. So that was the brief software testing or equivalence class testing for the conditions that we had inside our database in the code, and we checked it through the terminal and also through the user interface that we had in our blood donation application. Thank you.